Welcome, welcome. We're really excited to join you for another session of our Winter Garden Challenge 2024. And we're really excited to have Takota Coen with us this time. He's from Alberta, Canada, and he's going to be sharing with us some permaculture perspectives. So before we get started, Takota, could you maybe just share a little bit about what got you to where you are now?
Yeah, you bet. So I was born and raised on a mixed organic farm in as you said, Central Alberta, Canada. So we're we'd be like a growing zone 2-3. We get to minus 40 or 50 every year, and we'll get over well, it would be in Fahrenheit. We get 40 plus Celsius, which I think would be like 120 Fahrenheit in the summer times. Our growing season is about 115 days above freezing. This year we had a frost. I think it was the second week of June. We had a killing frost.
Wow.
So we live in a pretty tough part of the world. But as I said, I was kind of born and raised on the farm that I'm still at now, and just grew up in that, and I've just always loved it. I love the lifestyle. I love being my own boss. I love working with natural systems. I love experimenting, and I've been doing it full time since 2012. I did take a few years off after high school to get my journeyman ticket for carpentry, but since then I've been doing farming full time and also helping other folks kind of design small scale farms and homesteads as well through my other consulting and education work.
Great. And what are some of the main things you grow on your farm there?
Yeah, so we do, it's all pasture based, so grass-fed beef, pasture-raised pork, eggs. We also do we're getting into more berries. You can grow larger fruits like apples and pears and plums in our climate, but it's pretty tough, and it's hit and miss. But we have I think one of the best growing climates in the world for berries. Like we grow over a dozen different species of berries on our farm, and within those species, sometimes 4 or 5 varieties of each. And if you've ever had sour Skittles, that's basically what we can grow here in just every kind of berry you can imagine.
Wow.
We also have our own like dairy cows, and we've always had big gardens. I don't think I've ever bought in a bag of potatoes or onions or carrots or anything from the grocery store. But our main products that we sell on the farm is pork, beef, eggs, berries, and we've also recently started selling like livestock feed. We found a way to grow grain in a companion planting style. So we do like our oats, wheat, peas, barley, sunflowers, hemp, all grown in a polyculture, and we're able to combine it at the same. And so it makes for a really diverse feed for chickens, pigs, pretty much any livestock species you can imagine. And so we've started to sell that. We've been doing that for ourselves for 30 years, since before I was born, but we've really scaled it up in the last few years and started selling it to other folks as well.
That's a really neat idea. I think there'd be a lot of interest in that. Yeah. So you get all of those. They're all coming to maturity at about the same time.
Yeah. You have to pick and choose the varieties a little bit.
Right.
There's a bit of a kind of like
I can imagine.
But it's surprisingly it works out better than if you were to try to grow. Like it's the same thing if you were to grow any of those crops individually, but we find that there's a lot more resiliency in the system Like if it's a bad year for one crop, the other ones just do better. And
Okay.
the peas are used, the other taller grains, as a trellis to climb up, and they fix nitrogen.
Hmm.
So yeah, it actually it works surprisingly well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you do grow a garden,
Yes, yeah,
and
big
um,
gardens.
do you, do you do anything to push the seasons on your garden?
So we've
I think this is the first time I've talked to somebody in your growing zone.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's funny. Growing up, my mom, who kind of taught all of us kids how to garden,
mhm,
she always hated greenhouses. She found them too finicky, and so like about the only thing that we start is like tomatoes, and everything else we direct seed right
okay.
into the garden.
Hmm.
And so we've kind of developed just our own style of gardening, and also just eating habits, where in lieu of putting all this effort into whatever greenhouses or seeds to get that extra week or two, we've just shifted to more perennial things like asparagus,
Okay.
or wild crafting things like stinging nettles,
Hmm.
which is, they're the first thing out of the ground in the spring, or dandelions, or
Okay.
a new one of my favorites is, there's it's a linden tree, or Tilia americana,
Uh-huh.
and or basswood is another name for it. But they have, the leaves on the trees are almost like iceberg lettuce, like a cross between iceberg, butter crunch, spinach. Um,
Really?
and they're wonderful to have in the early spring. By this time of year, they're too tough. You can't
Right.
really eat.
Right.
But those are just some of the things that we found, is rather than mess around with the greenhouse side of things, and starting, we just shifted our eating habits a little bit, and go for more perennials. Now, that being said, I have personally started to experiment more with things like cold frames.
Hmm.
I'm really excited about I've done that for 2 years. But
Okay.
yeah, growing up, my mom fed 6 kids out of a garden, and I don't think we ever bought vegetables once, and
Hmm.
no greenhouse, just focusing on the preservation of, when
Right.
things were ready, eating seasonally, and then moving into more, um, yeah, kind of wild crafting things to extend our season that way.
That's great. Yeah. So, when you're going to lay out a garden,
Mhm.
especially in a northern zone like that, are there anything that you would recommend taking into consideration?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the intro there, that we have our growing season is like 115 days, and this year we had a frost June 2nd. Like normally our last frost is May 15th to kind of September 15th is our growing season, but we've on record we've had frosts in every month except August, historically. And
Wow.
so, now the reason I bring that up is probably one of the biggest things you need to consider when you're siting your garden is the microclimate aspect.
Yeah.
Um, and so, thinking of frost drainage.
Hmm.
Actually, before we get into that, I'll bring it back to kind of, there's two main kind of concepts in permaculture design that I find are really useful tools to think about, layout of any elements, gardens included, and those are sector analysis and zone analysis. So sectors are essentially all of the different energies that are coming into your property. So this might be frost, it might be wind, it might be your sun patterns,
Hmm.
it might be wildlife, it might be noise, dust, pollution, it could be traffic. So just any kind of energy that you can think of that's moving, around, through, or above your property,
Okay.
you want to start by mapping those out. And
Mm-hmm.
literally, this could be like a simple drawing. If you search, sector drawings online, you'll find some, they can be quite elaborate and aesthetically pleasing. They can also just be, crayon drawings too, if you're like me. But the key thing is to pull all the variables out, because it's really difficult to think about all this complexity at one time. So when you map it out on paper, I use Google Earth Pro as another great tool. But that can help you to visualize, okay, where is frost going to drain through our property? Where are we going to get shade lines? Where are we going to get, where are the traffic, of ourselves as we're moving through the property? Where are our daily work paths going to be? And so that gets into the second piece, which is zone analysis. And zones are maps of how we use our energy within the system. So sectors is the energy from outside coming in, and then the zones is our energy going out. And so essentially every element on your property, whether it's a plant, animal, or structure, you're putting it there because you need something from it, and it's also going to need something from you. So chickens need food, water, shelter, predator protection, but they also provide certain things to the system. And the idea is that the more something needs you, or the more you need it, the closer you put it to your center of operation, which is your house. And so when you kind of overlay those two maps on top of each other, the sectors and zones, you start to find, it's almost like a Venn diagram. You'll see like the sweet spot, and it's quite simple actually. Your garden like has to be within like, one or two spots on your property when you start to lay this out. And so for me, when I'm laying out my properties, I want the garden to be typically outside my kitchen window, so I can that's one of the spots in the house that you're spending the most amount of time at, so you can look out at it. And that's also typically, the kitchen windows face to the south in our climate. So I want it, in a highly visible location from within the house. I want it close to a front door, and I want it alongside my daily chore path, so that just, wherever, and depending on what else you're doing on your property, even I've got, dairy cows, pigs, chickens. So I'm going down to my livestock hub area at least twice a day. And then everyone else on our property is also going down there, 1 to 2 times a day as well. So putting your garden right along that chore path, so that just by nature of walking and to do something else, you can monitor your garden. You can, it's literally right through where you got raised beds on either side. So you can literally just reach over and, pull weeds and stuff. That's, I find, really helpful at just reducing the amount of time it takes to garden, because then you're just, as you're walking, you're doing it. So that helps to kind of think about the efficiency standpoint. To bring in the sectors piece, so that's where you want to think about, is there wet areas? Are there dry areas? Are there going to be shady areas, frosty areas? The place that my folks have their garden at our main farm this year, got frosted and killed a lot of the stuff in the garden. It still bounced back, and I think we'll be all right. But at my new property, I live 15 minutes away. I positioned my garden higher up in the landscape, and I didn't have any issues.
Interesting.
So frost flows just like water on the landscape, and it pools in the lower areas. And you'll find if you go out at night, you can get like 5-10 degrees Celsius temperature differentials from the high point on your property to the low point on your property.
Yeah, that's actually true on our farm.
Yeah,
we have about a 200-foot difference in elevation between the high point and the low point, and it can be as much as 10 degrees different.
Yeah,
particularly on cold, still nights.
Yes,
clear, still nights.
exactly. Yeah, and that's because otherwise the wind would blow the
It would
frost.
keep it dispersed. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple other things that I would throw in there too is thinking about, existing plants that you already have. So like certain trees or plants are just notoriously hard on gardens. So anything that suckers, stay clear. You either have to pull that thing out, like
Yeah.
raspberries, or raspberries are particularly bad.
They are.
A lot of people put their raspberry patch right next to the garden, and within 2 years they just have a really big raspberry patch.
We made a bad mistake when we do strawberries
Oh yeah.
on annual production in the southeast where we are. It's just easier to manage them annually.
Okay.
And so we thought, well, our raspberries, they seem to do well for a year or two and then they just go downhill.
Yeah.
And we thought, why don't we try putting raspberries on annual production? So
Okay.
we set up one hoop house with 2 beds of raspberries. That was a bad mistake because for the next couple of years after we were trying to take out those raspberry shoots.
Yeah. 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 No, I've seen them sucker underneath a road and pop up in a garden 30 or 40 feet away from where they were planted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Another one would be, things like really tall, like spruce or pine trees can be problematic if they're right beside it, or almost any deciduous tree. It's funny, like at my folks' place, there's a spot in my mom's garden where you can literally see like the height of the plants will be going along, and then it just kind of dips down and then comes back up again, and it's the same spot every year, and it's right in line with where we've got a really big poplar tree.
Interesting.
And you can literally see kind of where the root pattern is underneath the garden based by how things are growing. And so stuff is always stunted around that. Now, there are other trees that are what are known as like farmers trees, or they have a root structure that's particularly useful for gardening, which is they're generally tap-rooted plants that are nitrogen fixers. So this could be things like in our climate we use carragana is one, but any of the I think they're like acacias or honey locust. Yeah. Although I've heard some honey locusts sucker really badly, so I don't know how that would work if they would get into the gardens like that. But I know, things like Tegasasti. We use Siberian pea shrub or carragana, and or you can also plant the trees and do something called root pruning, which is to take a deep ripper and cut the roots off so they're not competing at the same level as your annual crops.
Okay.
But having those trees around, either for shelter, for fertility if they're nitrogen fixers, but also for dappled shade, they're just incredibly wonderful additions to a garden.
So do you have any recommendations on optimal spacing for trees like that if you're doing them in conjunction with a garden?
Yeah, I would say you'd probably want to go for like the target will probably be like 50% shade, I'm guessing. However, the way that I would set it up is I would plant them. I would still stick to a 30-inch bed, standard walkway system that all the market gardeners do, and then I would figure out how my trees were going to fit into that system, whether they were on the perimeter, or I've seen some, like one of my permaculture teachers, Jeff Lawton, he actually plants things like Tegasasti probably on 10 or 15 foot intervals right through his whole garden.
Oh, really?
And then he'll, coppice or pollard the trees, in the rainy season, but then in the dry season or the hot season, that's when they've got their canopy up above. So I would say, observe your, local trees, kind of see what makes sense. It'll probably be around the 50% mark. Always plant more than you need. and then you'll be able to look at your plants to see, okay, are they getting enough sunlight? Do they look stunted? Like, for example, on one of a new garden at my new place here, I can just see, looking now that I'm the corn here is about a foot tall right now, and at one corner of my garden it's only 6 inches. It's half the size, and just I can tell there's this one tree that's just shading that one corner just a little bit. So I just need to cut that off to make sure that I'm not having anything else. But I've got some quite large spruce trees. I'll share my my screen here. But yeah, I have some quite large, spruce trees right around my house here. So these are probably 60, 70 foot tall spruce trees that were there. They were way thicker when I bought the property, and I cut pretty much 1 to 3 trees out we planted in between every one of these.
Can
And
you orient us on what directions and sides of the house?
Here, this is a better shot here.
Okay.
So it's an old photo, but this is where my garden is right here.
All right.
Right in front of the house. That's my kitchen window. And so this is south.
Okay.
Is to the right side of the page. So it's it's basically getting shade from at certain points of the day from all directions, because the sun rises in the east here, and even with that much, at certain times of the day there's something that's shading it, and the only piece that it's just this one corner, and there's a couple trees here that I just need to nip off to the roof line, and I'll have even growth throughout the whole garden.
Interesting.
And maybe just to orient folks a bit more, this is the design of my new property here, so you can see it a bit closer. This is the garden out front. This will be my my chore path in the future to go down to do my my milking and gathering eggs and feeding pigs and stuff like that. Okay. So I want my kitchen garden right along that pathway, so it's easy for me to monitor. And then I've also got raised beds right outside my doors, and I'm really enjoying those. Like these guys, where's the shot here? Yeah, these raised beds here are cold frames, really simple.
Yeah.
They're just 2 rough 2x6 stacked on top of each other, and polycarbonate hinges. And so I'm still direct seeding right into these guys, and then opening the lids during the day, closing them at night. You could put automatic closers on if you wanted, like the wax seal cartridges, but right. It's right next to my main door, so I just do it manually. Here's here's kind of my main door here, and yeah, I definitely want to put more of those all the way around basically by every door of the house.
So how long have you been using those?
This will be my 2nd year with them.
Okay.
And yeah, really.
How far into the winter or how early in the spring have you been able to use that?
I was able to direct seed this year. What was it here? I think it was mid-April is when I was, so basically a month ahead of my growing, like when my last date is. And I was even able to put corn in at that time.
Oh, really?
Which was the most tender thing. In the future, I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. I'm going to stick to more cold hardy plants, and things like onions and lettuce and radishes and beans and peas. They things that aren't as finicky. The cucumbers that I direct seed at the same time, they didn't make it. I had to replant them a bit later. But.
So then you're transplanting out of there into your garden?
No, I'm just everything's planted in situ. and
Oh,
stays
okay.
there.
And so once it grows out of the box, you just leave the
Yeah,
top
that's right.
open. And
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
okay.
By that time, I get into my my growing season where we're not getting frost anymore. So I just take the
Right.
lids off, and then that will
Okay.
look like then it's like this. Then I actually can add trellises on,
Mm-hmm.
so the the peas and beans and stuff like that can climb up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I plant quite dense. Like there'd be one, two, 3, 4, 5 rows in this 16-inch, or sorry, 30-inch bed.
Yeah. And how many different crops do you have in
Yeah.
there?
So typically I'll put like some kind of a climbing thing on
Mm-hmm.
the backside. So this is peas. My cucumbers, like I said, they got knocked out this year. So I had to replant them, so they're not up yet. But
Yeah.
peas, beans, cucumbers along the vines. Then I've got a row of corn, then a row of onions. Then it was a row of carrots and radishes. So the radishes came
Mm-hmm.
out first,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then a row of lettuce. And that's been working quite well. I think I might take one of those rows out and just give everything a little bit more space.
Mm-hmm.
But so this is from this year, and that was just taken the other day. But last year, where's that shot here? Last year, I had corn it was planted just as densely. I had corn that was pushing 8 feet. I was getting 2 to 3 cobs per plant, so it was still everything was yielding
Wow.
still pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that's one of the new strategies that I'm working on with kind of how to extend our season a little bit. And I do want to play around with some greenhouses, but I don't have, because I didn't grow up with them. It's kind of a steep learning curve, and I've really found that this style of gardening is kind of the 80-20 in terms of, if you're trying to grow for self-reliance and just bulk quantities of food, the extra seed extenders that you get from a greenhouse, I don't know if it adds much if you've got your varieties of plants set out that they can ripen in the field direct seeded.
Right. Right. Yeah. For us, having a hoop house makes it, I mean, of course, we can grow quite a few things right through the winter. And we've done it out in the field, but
Yeah,
having a hoop house is nice because you have a protected space to work with those things.
yeah,
So
totally.
I think that's the main advantage for us. But we can do a lot that way. And you probably, because you're so extreme, um, I can see that even a hoop house isn't going to really do
Yeah,
that much for you.
yeah.
And
We
like you said, maybe a week or two extra.
yeah
But
we hit -50 this year.
yeah, I mean I can't imagine that. We we hit minus single digits for several nights this year, and we thought that was pretty extreme.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Like another thing that's folks might find interesting is like we bury our water lines 8 feet deep here.
no way.
And and last year I heard farmers, they had water lines freeze 8 feet down.
No way. Yeah, that is really extreme. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like there are guys in our area, and I've toured them just up the road from us, who have, solar greenhouses that are, they've got frost walls that go down 8 feet. And,
Hmm.
there's a guy who's growing bananas 15 minutes from my house.
Really.
But it's a $200,000 greenhouse.
Yeah, but it's passive solar.
It is passive solar. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really
Yeah.
neat.
And so
Yeah.
you can do stuff like that, but like, even because our frost just goes so deep in the ground, like you said, a hoop house just doesn't do much. It'll get you a few extra weeks on either end, but
Yeah.
who knows? There's lots of growers that do use them in our area, and they also have advantages for hail protection and
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff like that as well. But
Yeah. So, I really like your insights on laying things out. Um, you just recently published, co-authored a book, uh, which I actually got. I just got it. Haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it looks really, really interesting. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's called Building Your Permaculture
Mm.
Property, a 5-step process to design and develop land. And it's essentially an architectural or engineering manual for how to design kind of permaculture or homesteads or small farms. So it's not at all a how-to book on techniques or tips for doing specific things like gardening or animal systems. It's more of a high level principle and process approach for how to clarify your goals, diagnose your property and your personal resources, strategies for how to design integrated systems. Like I said, those sectors, the zones,
Hmm. Hmm.
the needs and yields, how to use GIS programs like
Hmm.
Google Earth Pro to create really interactive property designs that are actually they're alive, and then also how to create strategies for where to start in terms of implementation, because a lot of people get overwhelmed when they get
Yeah.
a property and they've got this whatever 25-year vision, but it's like, where do you start? And then there's also strategies for how to monitor your property, but also your personal resources for what I call like well-being and suffering, to make sure that you're actually going in the direction that you want to go. One of the biggest struggles that I've seen in my own life and my clients and students is that if they weren't born and raised on a farm and they live in the city, you can have this idyllic vision of what it would be like to live on the land. But when you get out there, it can be, you leave the rat race of the city just to get on the hamster wheel of the farm. And so this
Very
book,
true.
this book that I wrote was think of it as a kind of an engineering manual for step by step for how to design and develop land anywhere in the world. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to reading that and implementing it. Because
Yeah.
I've got a new piece of land that I'm wanting
Okay.
to set
Nice.
up. So, yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things I'll say is the when you're designing a piece of property, it's complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated. And so what I
Mm.
mean by that is the human brain is really good at pattern recognition and connecting dots, but it's really bad at holding multiple pieces of information in mind at one time. So
Mhm.
there's various studies that have been done that show the human brain can only hold kind of 3 to whatever 5 or 7 pieces of information at once before your cognitive functioning drops to the level of like a 3-year-old. Like if
Yeah.
you remember.
That's happened to me.
uh, and so like a lot of the book is really just like a process for how to take something that's so complex and just put all these data points down, whether it's on a piece of paper or a GIS system, so
Mhm.
that once it's all done, the properties literally design themselves.
Nice.
And it's pretty cool. So it's that's basically the design. So I wouldn't start, if you're new to permaculture or gardening or farming, I wouldn't start with that book. You'll want to have a bit more of a background experience in taking an introduction to permaculture course or a
Mhm.
permaculture design course,
Mhm.
and maybe even play around with working on other people's properties for a year or two, watch lots of videos, and then when you're ready to really get into it, you've made a few mistakes, that's where I think this book will be really helpful. And there's lots of tools and templates that are included in the book, and it's literally step by step. Like, do this
Mhm.
exercise, then do this one, then do this one, and through that process, you'll have insights and make connections that you would have never thought possible.
Yeah, that sounds great. What, would you have a permaculture course, design course that you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. I really love Jeff Lawton's work.
Hmm.
Uh, I've taken several courses from him. He's got some great online ones that are live. He also has recordings that you can purchase. He also has lots of free stuff online as well. And Bill Mollison, who's one of the co-founders of
Right.
permaculture in the 70s, he actually has there's a free course that you can get. It's on a website called Network Earth,
Oh.
and it's one of it's an old the recordings aren't very good, but the content is just amazing, I find.
Hmm.
And he has some old audio recordings as well, and then an old DVD set, and that's where I would start. Jeff is a really great kind of introductory teacher, because he's just so basic and tells such great stories. But then if you want to get more complex and then see kind of the application of this design system played out, Bill is there's nobody else like him.
Hmm.
The way that he thought about the world and saw connections was really inspirational.
Very interesting. Thanks.
Yeah.
You have also done quite a bit in developing the concept of food forests. You know, food forests are something that is
Yeah.
talked about quite a bit in permaculture. But you know, most of the work on food forests that I have seen is centered in tropical
Yeah.
forests, like down in Brazil.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm very interested because you've been working on cold climate
Yeah.
food forests. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think food forest was actually my gateway drug into like permaculture, and
Oh,
all this.
really?
Even though I was born and raised on a farm, we did things pretty traditionally. We were organic since my folks went organic in 1988,
Hmm.
but we still did full tillage on the gardens, and all of our livestock were still separate. And anyways, when uh, one day I came across this idea of food forestry, which is essentially you're mimicking the natural function and form of nature's most resilient, productive ecosystem. That's they exist everywhere in every climate in the world. There's some type of forest ecology that will grow for free with zero input. And it's like, how do the idea that we can observe those systems and learn from them to create these low input, high yield, beautiful systems was just got my attention right away.
Mm.
And so now I've probably killed more trees than than anybody else in Canada, I think, trying to experiment with these different systems, and reading all kinds of books and taking courses and stuff. But what I found quite recently actually is the most comprehensive system that I've come across for designing food forests comes from the syntropic agroforestry school of thought.
Hmm.
And so they've just really broken it down into really just like a half dozen principles that
Could,
you
could
can.
you could you
Yeah.
just explain what syntropic
Yeah.
is?
So entropy is a concept in thermodynamics, which is the idea that basically everything in the system, everything in the universe is constantly decaying or losing energy. It's just getting, ever since the Big Bang, or however you want to call it, things have just been kind of getting worse. I don't actually agree with that
Mhm.
idea, but another way to look at it is like if you've got there's some kind of chemical reaction or you heat an object up, and then once you stop doing anything to it, the energy just slowly dissipates, and it comes back to,
Degrades. Mhm.
yeah. Now, that's clearly not how the universe works, because otherwise, like, it would be gone by now, and there wouldn't
Right.
be all the complex life forms. And no matter what your view of history is, whether it's you believe in God, or the Big Bang, or almost anything else, we had to start from nothing.
Mhm.
And whether there was asteroids and glaciers in the past, or you can even see this on the side of the road, there'll be trees growing off mountainsides, or weeds growing out of the cracks in concrete.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so there's some force in the universe that's able to take nothing and turn it into something. And if you
Mm.
fast track that over a long period of time, that ecological succession is truly amazing. And
Yes.
that's the concept of syntropy, is that the universe actually isn't just degrading and getting worse all the time. It's actually getting more complex, more abundant,
Mm.
and more rich in energy in all forms. And so the idea is, how can we mimic that force in the universe and partner with it to
Mm.
actually speed things up?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a system for starting a food forest that uses that concept then.
Yeah. That's the base kind of observation, or base principle, is that there's some force in the universe that can take nothing and turn it into something. How can we speed that up? And
Mhm.
then further down from that, there's the principle of strata, which is looking at the different heights of plants.
Mhm.
So you've got emergence, highs, mediums, and lows.
Mhm.
Then you're looking at the principle of life cycle, which is, you've got annuals, biennials, perennials, or short-lived perennials, kind of long-lived perennials, and then your climax species.
Mhm.
And then you're also looking at the principle of succession, which is the idea that within annuals, biennials, and perennials, there are certain groups of plants that are kind of pioneer organisms,
Right.
and there are other groups of plants that are more climax organisms. And so, for example, like, if you are starting out with just clay or gravel, or really poor soil, you can't go in and plant a climax fruit tree that's needs all this rich, deep topsoil, and good water cycling, and all the diversity of flora and fauna in the soil. You're going to need to build that up through that process of succession. And so you need to select kind of the annuals, biennials, and perennials based on what stage of succession your ecosystem's at. Are you a piece of concrete, or do you have the 10-foot topsoils like they do in Iowa? Um, and then another principle is just the key piece of management and timing. So it's doing the right amount of the right thing at the right place in the right time.
Mhm.
Um, and then further, coming back to that synergy piece, is how do you speed that process, that takes something and takes nothing and turns it into something in the universe, and fast track that. And we kind of put all those other principles together, um, you start to get these systems that are, like, for example, like, last year I had more growth on trees in one season that I've had um, in 5 years in previous planting systems.
Really.
Yeah. And now these were, we live in a pretty harsh climate. Like, we only get 12 inches of rain a year. And trees are in the prairies here. They don't really grow unless it's in kind of a wet, area around a wetland or in a low spot,
Mhm.
without care. So
Mhm.
we live in a pretty harsh climate. But before that, we've planted, like 40,000 trees on our farm since I was a kid. And it was so much work to get these things to just put on 6 inches a year. And last year, like I said, I got some trees that put on, I think it was over 4 feet of growth in a single year. And they're on track to put another 6 feet of growth on this year. So
Really?
yeah, it really is. And I have some longer presentations that I've done on my YouTube channel, and I've got a free resource booklet that kind of lays out those principles and gives some charts for how to kind of select what kind of species of plants that would work in your context. Because again, that can be a lot of things to think about at one time, but once you have the tools to take all those variables out and just put them out on paper, your brain just makes connections and will be able to fill in the gaps.
Yeah. So your website, you said you have this resource on your website.
Yeah, it's buildingyourhomestead.com.
Buildingyourhomestead.com. Okay. Great. Just one last thing I wanted to touch on with you. You do a lot with raising livestock. I mean, that's your main farm operation.
Yeah.
Most of our viewers are going to be either home gardeners or homesteaders.
Yeah.
There's a few small farmers. Do you incorporate, or do you have any recommendations for incorporating animals into your garden? That could be a dangerous thing, but
no, absolutely. So I have a YouTube presentation that's on my channel. It's called Gardening with Livestock.
Okay.
And it lays out a bunch of different ways that just ideas that we've used on our farm for how you can use livestock, whether it's pigs, chickens, cows, it could be any other species as well, to do the weeding, the tilling, the fertilizing, the bed prep, the pest control, all these different things. And again, the key piece there is it's the right amount of the right thing at the right time in the right place. And if you miss one of those variables up, it won't work.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example of that is if you let chickens out at 8 o'clock in the morning and let them free range in your garden, by the evening you won't have a garden left. Right? But if you let chickens out at an hour before sunset or an hour before dark, they won't touch any of your plants. They'll just go after the bugs.
Okay.
Now, if you don't want to play that kind of a high stakes game, you can also have them on top of your garden in the off season, which when you're putting your beds to rest, move your coop or put up some electro netting. I'm a big fan of these Aluma coops. They're actually made in the United States. I think they're the best chicken tractor on the market. They're made by the Amish. I'm a dealer here in Western Canada, but you can get them anywhere in the States and even in places in Europe too. But make it so easy to be able to concentrate, chickens or basically any small animal. Chickens could be guinea pigs, rabbits, even turkeys, ducks, geese, and concentrate their effort, in a select footprint. So you could move that right over top of your garden beds or in between your fruit tree rows. But they add just so much to this is another example of that synergy piece where it's like 1 + 1 is not 2, it's like 50. If people have been doing composting and stuff without animal inputs, and then they add in even just a few chickens, the force multiplier effect of that, whatever's in their nutrients, and phosphorus is a big part of that, but it's more than just that. It just does something to the soil. And so finding for fertility by itself, you should have some kind of animal on your operation, or you should be doing manure composting. I would say if you don't have animals, that's really the only other way you're going to be able to build that up. But so other examples of how to use livestock is I've used pigs to break up garden beds if I've got quack grass or particularly really difficult weeds to get rid of. I can my chickens in, or sorry, my pigs in the year before and just let them just nuke the place.
Okay.
And then the next year, no quack grass, no thistles. But you can also have your animals in a completely separate system. They're never actually interacting with your garden, and you just bring the compost or livestock bedding to your garden from the animal systems. On my parents' farm, and I've some YouTube videos of this on my channel where I kind of do some soil testing in my gardens. We turned literally pure clay into like beautiful topsoil within a few years by just cover cropping and bringing in livestock nutrients, basically the chicken bedding from our winter chicken housing. And we don't even compost it. We actually just add it in the fall, let it break down over the winter, and just rototill it in just to really simplify things. And that
you just lay it on top of the ground in the fall.
Yeah. And then it kind of breaks down over winter, and then we'll till it in the spring. And that and cover cropping has we've turned pure clay into just beautiful topsoil.
Wow.
So I can't say enough good things about having some kind of animal integration in your systems. There's also lots of videos of people using ducks or small ducks to get slugs out. If you've got there's a saying in permaculture: you don't have a snail problem, you have a duck deficiency. And so it's like whatever the problem is in your operation, try to see it as a solution. And typically, animals are one of the most high impact solutions you can bring in. They can also be a disaster if they're not managed properly. And so many people battle with chickens getting into their gardens, or predator problems, or diseases and pests. But when you do the right amount of the right thing at the right time in the right place, they are phenomenal elements on your property. And you don't have to use so much of the kind of animal husbandry world, I think similar in the plant world, has been co-opted by kind of the big agribusiness to make it seem like you need to be an expert, or that you need to put all these sprays or chemicals or whatever it is to get things to grow. Like if you buy any animal husbandry book on any species, the first 10 pages are what the animal needs for, food, water, and shelter. And then the rest, the other 95% of the book is all the drugs you have to give it to keep it from dying. And we've been organic since the 80s. We don't use antibiotics. We don't use vaccines. We don't use any pharmaceuticals of any kind. We don't get sick animals. But it's about the design. It's about the animal husbandry, and they're just fantastic elements to add into.
So there's something about managing a diversity of life. And you're bringing it together in synergy and. But the management part is key.
It really is. There's another saying in permaculture, which is work is a form of pollution, or another way they'll put it is any resource that's not put to productive use becomes a pollution.
Interesting.
And so when your systems aren't designed properly, they feel like drudgery, and they create pollution or waste. And so, and this is part of the book that I wrote, is the drudgery and pollution, or I call it like suffering for yourself or anything else. Those are the key things that you need to monitor for on your homestead or farm or ecosystem, because those are the early warning systems that something's missing in the design or something's missing in the ecosystem. And through management, you can turn those problems or pollutions into unimaginable resources.
Okay. Well, I got to read that then. Well, thank you, Takota. This has been really, really interesting. Very good.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share with us, or?
So our model for our business, building your homestead, is that this is a revolution disguised as homesteading. And I say that because, there's so many problems in the world, no matter what political spectrum you're on, whether it's left or right, or if you're apolitical like me. There's everyone sees that there's something not right in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that gardening, homesteading, becoming a producer, becoming a co-creator, even if it's on a small balcony, it changes you. It changes how you look at the world, and I think that is actually one of the most radical things that we can do today. And as my teacher Jeff Lawton says, all the world's problems can be solved in a garden. And I really do think that's where this stuff starts. And so, a lot of people, I think, are urban refugees. They're fleeing from the cities because they're seeing what's happening in the world, and they're getting back on the land. And I just like to remind people that let's not run away from things. Let's run towards stuff. And the future that we can have can be so amazing. And I really do think it all starts in the garden.
Yeah, I really like that. The biblical account says it all started in the garden, and you're saying the solution's in the garden too. That makes sense. Perfect sense. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you taking the time to join us and be with us, and wish you the best in all you're doing. And we'll try to get your resources up where people can see them. And by the way, I'm hoping and trusting that by the time we show this, we're going to have your book in our store, our
wonderful
store. So
cool.
I'd like to steer people towards your book too. It's a really good book.
Awesome. Yeah. And there is also an online course as well that I produced with Curtis Stone, actually.
Oh, really?
Through Freedom Farmers.
Okay.
Well. So that's that could be something else that you could link through. It's up on his website.
It's on Curtis's website.
Yeah, Freedom Farmers. It's run through.
Yeah.
But it's the same. It's building your permaculture property. It's the 5-step process. But it's as opposed to reading or listening to the book, it's kind of me telling some more personal stories, kind of going through the whole thing. But that's one of the courses that you can get if you're signed up through his platform.
Okay, great. So yeah, if you're signed up with Curtis and Freedom Farmers, or you might want to check it out if you're not.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's another great resource. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. God bless, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.